Welcome to Work You Love, real stories of career change and fulfillment. This is the show where we share real stories of people who once felt stuck in their careers, made a change, and found work that lights them up. I'm your host, Danielle. I've worn a lot of hats in my own career, and my mission here is simple: to help you find work that you love. Each week, you'll hear inspiring stories and practical tools to stop feeling stuck and start building a career that truly fits you. So let's dive in. Welcome, Meghann. I'm so excited to have you on. You have a truly incredible and inspiring story, so I can't wait for listeners to hear more about it. But I always love to start with, what are you doing now and what do you love most about it?
Oh my, what am I doing now? I have been in a season of launching my own business. I do host the Becoming is Messy podcast, and I had a guest on talking about women entrepreneurs. And she described the entrepreneur season for women as kind of the biggest growth opportunity. And I can so attest to that. This period for me has been so much about my own growth and learning. And so here I am, trying to build my coaching and speaking business. I do have a coaching framework that's very informed by my trauma background and my degree in psychology and my 20 years in corporate leadership. But at the same time, as I'm building that business, I have just been in a season of learning and growing.
I think so much of your experience, which I want to get into, has led you to this space or place to be able to be this empowerment coach for other people. So I'd love to rewind a little bit and get to know where you were before in your career and what led you into the coaching world.
I went to college over 20 years ago and got a degree in psychology. I actually had planned to get a business degree and was failing one math class that I needed for that degree. So I dropped the class and switched over to psychology just because I loved the topic so much. And I planned on sticking with psychology. I was going to go on and get my master's and all of that and eventually practice psychology. But in the meantime, in between undergrad and plans to go to graduate school, I landed a job at a small trade association. And that trade association for school business officials in Pennsylvania welcomed me to the world of adult education, which then led into a 20-year career in the credit union industry. I established myself as a leader in the instructional design space. By the time I left that organization, I was heading up their professional development program. Essentially, my team put together all of the professional development conferences, webinars, and certifications. And most recently, that led me to the insurance arm of the credit union industry, also leading cross-functional teams around strategic partnership initiatives and just other human growth potential and aligning that with business objectives. So I always like to say that, across the whole 20 years, regardless of the role, developing people and teams has always been my sweet spot. And in most recent years, I just started getting that nudge, like I hear from so many women, that it was just my time to go off on my own and build my own business and bring my unique strengths and gifts into the things that I uniquely wanted to solve in the world. I planned on doing that in a very strategic way 5 years from now as an early retirement. But as many times with the universe, the nudge got louder and louder, and I found myself starting to feel I was in a really toxic environment for the first time ever in my career. I just started feeling like I wasn't aligned with where the team was going. I was crying on the treadmill, feeling like I was mismatched, and really just increasingly seeing dips in my health and multiple ways my body was reacting to telling me that I was in the wrong space and it was time to go off on my own, which I did this past January, and really brought me back full circle to those psychology roots, which I had always envisioned getting back to, just on my own time and in my own way. So now here I am, launching the speaking and coaching business and a few months in, and I'm excited for where the journey is taking me.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point that you realize this through line in your career. And you thought to yourself, well, what do I love most about what I'm doing in my job now? And that
Right.
led you to understand what kind of business you wanted to open. Going back to this intuitive feeling of, I think I'm ready to go off on my own and not wait for retirement to
Yeah.
start coaching others. I think a lot of people just sadly stay in that cycle, having kind of the golden handcuffs, making a lot of money, not being able to step away and pursue something that they know would make them a lot more happy and fulfilled. What were some of the steps that you took to actually be able to take that leap of faith?
Yeah, so I've had multiple times in my life where I've ignored that inner knowing. And I've seen then how that progression rises where the nudge doesn't go away. I believe there's a mix of Maya Angelou at first and then Oprah who talk about that the universe speaks to us in whispers first and then gets louder and louder until it eventually knocks you over the head. And for me, that literally happened twice. I have, two examples. One was personal when I left an unhealthy marriage and ended up with a concussion that led me to finally heed the call and leave my first husband. And second was a professional time where similarly I ignored that call and my health started taking a dip. And again, I ended up with a concussion, which are two just crazy stories for another time. Those are some long stories, but they really help solidify my development framework. And so I talk about in my coaching, once you have that nudge, I've essentially established tools for myself to heed that call because I can see the signs of the spiral. I can see moving towards that escalation. So for me, when I start feeling so misaligned, and that's what happened, I was in a role for 2 years. And during that time, I could just feel myself more and more misaligned with where the team was going. Not to say that they weren't well intended and great people. It just, I started feeling not my truest self. I started feeling not valued. I started feeling tired all the time, not excited to go to work. I started feeling sick. I was crying at the gym. I was wanting to avoid situations where I'd have to travel with these folks. I was drinking too much, staying up too late, just a lot of spiraling. And so for me, it became and I'm almost a nudge I couldn't avoid anymore. I could see that escalation happening. And I feel very fortunate to have a supportive husband and life partner who I was able to go to as my partner in crime and say, after a 20 some year, very successful career, my gut just knows that it's time for me to step back. Can you, take the reins a little bit and be our family breadwinner and give me a chance to just take a bit of a pause and reflect on where I want to go next and get myself out of a situation that is not good for me?
Yeah, it's so unfortunate that sometimes we do have to hit that rock bottom in order to
Sure.
then move
Yes.
forward and get ourselves out of it.
Yeah.
And also knowing how to ask for help, because I think, especially women, we feel like a lot is on our shoulders and we have to do everything. Is that something that you had to overcome too?
I have a chronic trauma background and my coping and survival skills from that background, one of them is perfectionism, very extremely. From a very young age, I was the oldest child, oldest daughter in a family that had my dad was an alcoholic. He was abusive to my mom. I was her protector. I felt like, even as young as 4, I felt like the protector of our family. And so, really, I internalized a lifetime of taking care of others and putting my needs aside. So, for me to go to my husband in this time and raise the white flag and ask for help, for me, that was really hard. And no discredit to him. He's a wonderful partner and he's been there as my support and my rock for so long now. But to flat out go and the thing, I mean, I just define myself by my productivity, by my paycheck, by my title. And to go to him and say I needed to give those things up for my mental health was really, really hard. However, I feel like in doing so, It just helped reiterate we don't get through this life alone. Yeah, and asking for help is not a sign of weakness. We all need help along our journey. And sometimes it's that help that really spurs us into our next amazing phase. And so much can come from that when you mentally are able to just lean on somebody else.
Yeah, and also that highlights the importance of being able to receive too. I mean, that's
Yes,
something
so
that I struggled
true.
with for a really long time is if I can't get help from my husband, then how am I expected to receive it in any area of my
Yeah.
life if I don't feel almost worthy of that
Yeah.
help?
And it's been good for our partnership too, because I feel like that receiving and giving him the chance to, yeah, be there in this way to support his type A personality, go-getter wife who's always been so driven, for him to be able to step in and take care of me essentially in this season. It's been so good for our marriage. And giving him that chance, I think it's a balance, and we all have a chance to give and receive, and that's not any one person's role in a family. And it's okay to give each other the chance to play those different roles.
Yeah, I love that point too, because when I think about generosity, I always think about I want to keep on giving and giving and giving, but I
Yeah,
want to do that because that also makes me feel good. So
right.
giving someone else the opportunity to give that gift to me so that they can feel good, you're almost also giving them something
Yes. Oh my gosh,
in
it's
that way.
true. Yeah, that has
Yeah.
been my experience, and it's been much more rewarding than I would have realized in so many different ways.
Yeah, and something that I think is just so important for people to remember if they are doing any kind of career change or wanting to start their own business, like don't be afraid to ask people for help because that really is the only way that you'll be able to succeed. Like you
Yes.
just can't do it all on your
Yeah.
own.
Oh my gosh. So true. And I feel like I started big with my husband's ask, but I've carried that forward over these last months. I've had to lean on lots of people for different expertise. When you're starting your own business, there's just so many things that I don't know what I'm doing, and I'm having to learn new. Even you and I have talked, Danielle, of like when do you enlist somebody else's help versus when do you figure it out yourself? And I feel like every day I'm navigating that question.
Yeah. I would love to go back to getting into some more of your, I think you mentioned four-part framework into helping people. Could you
Sure.
walk us through that a little bit?
Yes. Yeah, so this framework was born, it's essentially 7 competencies is truly what it is, and this was born out of leaving my first marriage. Was really I feel like that was, we have those moments in life where there's the before and there's the after. And for me, this was my turning point after a lifetime of chronic trauma, starting at birth with an infection right at birth that wreaked havoc on my body, led to a gazillion surgeries, plus living in the home of an alcoholic who was verbally abusive, leading into my own kind of spiraling behavior, and eventually marrying somebody that was very much like my abusive dad, which is such a common path for those of us with trauma backgrounds. In that marriage, I really found myself completely lost. And I felt almost like a ghost living through the world, just moving kind of in somebody else's story. My husband had beaten me down so much that there was just a shell of me left. And then, after infertility and years of trying to get pregnant, I always knew I would be a mom, and having my daughter completely inspired me to do better for both of us. I would be up in the middle of the night nursing her, and that's when I started getting that first inner knowing, that first nudge, which was do better for yourself and for your daughter. You need to take control. You need to be in the driver's seat of your own life and stop letting the world happen to you. You need to take control. So that led to me finally taking action and getting out of that situation, which led to about a year of practices that just kind of unfolded in order. So for me, it was once I started getting that nudge, my next step was starting to understand how I could hear that nudge more. And in order to do that, I started going to therapy secretively and really had the chance to look at my childhood as a neutral observer was the technique that I learned. So this is essentially step 2. So this is my framework in real time, how it unfolded. You get that inner nudge. What do you do with that inner nudge? Well, you have to get clear on that inner nudge. And some ways to do that are by tapping into your background, your story, and helping, leaning on a therapist or some other technician who can help you tease out and look at your story as an observer and see some of those patterns, see where some of those wounds happened. From there, the next step for me was finding lessons in so the kind of the signs that you get from people. And I ended up falling in love with my best friend when I was married. And so, I very much believe in catalysts and people coming in our path for a reason. And so, step 3 in my framework is to value the lessons, even the messy ones. What patterns are you still doing? What people are showing up, and really trying to understand the reason for that. What lesson does this person have for me? I like to say, value the lessons, even the messy ones. I feel like the messiest ones are usually kind of that guide that's there to move you forward. And so, I don't, it's not an excuse and say, encourage people, hey, go out and find lots of messy stories to make in your life. However, you're going to have messy encounters and be able to take a look at those and see what they're teaching you to move you forward instead of continuing to have those messy relationships. For me, in order to kind of solve the want and the need to have affairs, I needed to confront it and understand my why. And then I got the lesson, and then that helped me kind of level up to the next step, examining more of the spiritual practices, really starting to believe in the magic of the universe. And this one, I mean, any books you can find on spirituality, signs, synchronicities, it's kind of like once you realize that that inner knowing is so real and it's telling you and guiding you, you start getting this feeling that the external world is talking to you too. And so it's kind of like a bridge of those 2. And so the more you go through these competencies, the more you're ready for the next one. You've now kind of started hunkering down to your own day to day. Now leverage your external world and see what it's telling you and figure out some of those magical universe principles to be able to help heighten your awareness of all of those practices. And then it's continuing to build your healing toolbox. So for many of us, staying in that talk therapy, that's not always a solution forever, and it's not always the right solution at the right time. So for me, I am constantly staying on top of new modalities for people like me, for the needs that I have, the gaps in my life, and curiosity really kind of draws me towards continuing to find tools to put into my toolbox and continue to focus on my own healing. And then last is just starting to love yourself. When you're truly, authentically loving yourself, you're so empowered to be able to own your truth and start telling people your story. And then as you do that, you not only validate for yourself that you are still lovable, even with that full story, you also start kind of spreading this whole idea and framework and healing journey to others as you tell your story. So essentially, you're healing yourself and you're helping to heal others by passing on all of the information that you've learned.
Yeah, there's so many beautiful takeaways from your framework, but I love that from your story because you had such a traumatic upbringing and you could have lived the rest of your life living in that old story of like, well,
Yeah.
all of these things happened to me
Yeah.
and that's why I am this way and that's why I have to live this way. But you took the action that you needed to take to overcome that and own your story. And I think these steps that you laid out are very similar to things that I have also changed my life, like viewing people and any kind of emotional reaction that you have, any
Yeah.
triggers that you have that they're causing as almost a reflection of what you can look at internally.
Yeah.
Like, even an example that I can think of is I think it was a year or 2 ago, it was my manager had pointed something out that I did wrong in my work, and I took it so personally,
Oh,
and once I had changed my perspective on, like, "Wait, let me take a look at this from an outsider's perspective of why is this hitting so hard? This was valid feedback." If do I believe something about myself, like I'm not smart enough or I'm not good enough? Where
yeah.
when this person said that, it just reflected some internal belief that I had. And taking on that perspective, I think, is like one of the most powerful things that you can do for yourself and start observing your life as like all of these opportunities to learn and grow versus these things are happening to me and staying angry about whatever is going on in your life. And totally agree also about just the magical moments of every day, like, what can you take a look at that you feel like is pointing you to a certain direction? I think also in your instance too, you had this intuitive hit of it's time for me to step into, the coaching space. And I'm sure once you started taking some kind of action or like thought about it, things started happening externally that just like validated
Yes.
those
Oh my gosh.
feelings.
So true. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I feel like validated. And then even the day, especially on times when I was ready to give up, it's like I'm so I'm like, "Oh, I've had it. It's been a stressful day. I'm on the wrong path." And then that's the day I get a new client, or that's the day that, some other win comes in to just be this little hug from the universe saying, "No, keep going." Once you start building the practice to be looking for those things, it makes it that much easier for you to just focus on your next right step. You don't have to solve how and your long-term strategy. You just need to figure out what's right for you to do in your immediate next step. And between your intuition and all those signs you're getting, you're going to be shown what that next step should be.
Yeah. And paying attention to the things that are going right versus the things that are going wrong. Yeah.
Yes, for me, that mindset shift of constantly wondering in this situation, how could I have grown? What could have moved me forward? What could I have done differently? Not in a way that I'm beating myself up, actually in a way that feels really good because I'm doing it in that non-judgmental way. But that's how I grow and become a better version of myself. And to me, I think that's one of the biggest differences between people that stay in that stuck "woe is me" victim mindset is thinking that the external world is the cause of all of their problems and that they have no control in driving their own story.
Yeah, and for someone who has experienced some kind of traumatic upbringing and has that intuitive hit or feeling that they're meant for more, but they've never put any of these things that you're talking about into practice, what's a piece of advice that you would offer to them as like a first step, something that they could do today, this week to start to tune into that inner voice more and look at their patterns and triggers? Because we're really well versed in it, but for someone
Yeah.
who's, like, so new to it, I'm just thinking, "Okay, how can they get started?"
Yeah. To me, I mean, really finding that inner voice, it really comes down to being able to quiet your inner critic and know the difference between your inner critic and your deepest knowing. To do that, a few different things. Really, it's just finding moments of stillness, and for some people, it's really hard to stay quiet, to go for a walk or run with no music. If you can't do that, start with some maybe quieter music. Start with maybe some instrumental music. Just try to give your brain some time to just let it do what it does and not overthink, which can be really hard. But if you find places of silence, for me, one of my favorites is just a long hot shower is a time where I find that my brain can get to that stillness. And when you start at kind of hearing that inner voice, the inner critic is going to make you feel cringy. It's going to make you feel less than. It's going to make you feel bad about yourself. That is your inner critic. It's not true. That it is lying to you, trying to keep you small. Your inner voice, your deepest knowing, it feels good. It lights you up. You feel excited when you hear it. Even if what it's telling you is scary, you still feel really good when it's saying it to you, even if you don't know how you're going to do it. So it's really getting to be able to kind of discern that difference. I feel like it's going to be that first step. And how you get there is just whatever works for you and getting some more stillness in your day. That could be exercise, that could be time in nature.
Yeah, that is such a good piece of advice and something I actually haven't ever thought of before of the importance of just like sitting down with your own thoughts, especially today when there's so many distractions. And like, I think there's starting to be this movement where people want to move away from being on their phones all the time and
Yeah.
constantly distracted. And more tools are coming up to help with that. Like we just got something called a brick device,
Oh,
and
yeah,
you
yeah.
tap your phone on it so that you have to physically walk over to untap your phone and get access to certain applications that are addictive. Something that I started doing in my own journey was waking up, not looking at my phone for at least like the first half an hour of the day. That might be hard for some people just because we have responsibilities and we have to get our day moving. But even
Course.
waking up like 10 minutes earlier,
Yeah.
getting an alarm that's not your phone and sitting with a journal and just like writing whatever's on your mind can really bring so much clarity into your life. And we're just distracting ourselves from what we actually want
Yeah.
because of some kind of fear. And I think that's one of the hardest but most important things that I've learned to do is that concept that you were talking about, how to discern fear from misalignment.
Mhm.
And I've seen it come up in my business many, many times where I feel like coaching is something that I love to do. I do it naturally with my friends, but I've had to work through a lot of fear over the past year of really being seen and feeling like I have valuable information to offer. So it's definitely a process. So I think once you sit down and you think about what you really want and you do that in stillness and then sit with yourself and think, would this make me happy? You know, if everything went right, like this ideal work day or ideal day. And then are any fears coming up that are stopping you from actually pursuing it? And then once you're aware of it, because those things can also just be in our brains on a subconscious level and dictate our actions, then you can use some of the tools that I'm sure you've explored too to actually overcome those fears. Was there
Yeah.
anything that you used in particular in terms of like therapeutic
Yeah.
methods that helped you overcome some of those fears that you realized were reflecting to yourself in your own life?
I would say this year has been a big, milestone for me in my next level of healing. I thought, that had done so well. I'd done the talk therapy. I love, like, that whole sensory deprivation and going for an hour and floating in kind of without sound or light, was very helpful for me. But this year, kind of parallel with launching my business, I ended up taking a somatic experiencing class. At the same time, I've been going to monthly craniosacral massage. So both of these modalities are addressing my nervous system, which from my chronic trauma background, in my mind, totally thought that I had checked all the boxes. I was doing great in life. I had gotten my healing certificate. I felt like I had overcome and was past the healing needs I had. And then I started doing this work on my nervous system, and I realized the way my nervous system was so still protecting me from the years of trauma and holding me back. So for me, it was just this was the next level I was meant to attend to through addressing it with through the craniosacral massage is somebody else helping soothe my nervous system, every couple weeks for me because it's in such a heightened state. It's been huge. But then also with somatic experiencing, arming myself with knowledge to be able to have just a few practices to recognize, when I feel like overstimulated, when I feel like I'm starting to go on edge, if I feel really exhausted, I just now have some tools to be able to focus on my nervous system.
I think that this is such a good point around talk therapy because I personally know a lot of people who go to therapy, but they still stay like just traditional talk therapy and they
Yeah.
still stay really stuck. And I think just talking about other modalities and being open to how this can help people too is almost giving permission to people to start to look into things. Even talk therapy was something that was weird, I don't know, like how
Yeah.
many years ago, and now that's become normalized. And I think these other versions of therapy are becoming more normalized, and it's so true that things can just live in your body if you've had traumatic events happen that you can't access through just normal talk therapy. I actually don't know anything about craniosacral
Craniosacral.
massage or somatic therapy. I would love to learn more about that.
Yes, so I am not an expert on either, but I'll do my best. So craniosacral massage is essentially focusing on your nervous system massage with very gentle pressure. So instead of kind of, you think of like a deep tissue massage, this instead is essentially along your spine where your vagal nerve is. And they have some gentle pressure points that they focus on to help kind of calm that nervous system. And essentially, it's teaching it how to calm itself. So, for those of us that have trauma background, our nervous system is in whatever state it used to protect us. And so it doesn't have it's kind of wired to be backwards from what it needs to be. And so that it never really gets to that baseline state. So this is somebody through massage helping you get to that baseline state. For somatic experiencing, it's essentially this is not at all the definition of it, but from my experience, arming you with the tools to be able to address that your parasympathetic nervous system. So again, that fight, flight, freeze, fawn, to be able to, when you find yourself kind of going into those survival states, it's tools that you can use. So whether there's breathing exercises, there's body movements that you can do, there's movements you can do with your eyes to be able to own kind of control over getting yourself back to that baseline state and being able to bring yourself off the ledge before your nervous system escalates.
Yeah, I love that. I feel like I want to try it too.
And I would say I loved talk therapy. Talk therapy, played a huge role in my healing journey. I've just come to learn that in different seasons of my life, you know, my mind, my body, my spirit, they all need different things. I feel like at the heart of this is I really feel like we're in this massive energetic shift right now where there's this tension between our old way of doing things, which is a very societal prescribed structure to what success looks like and how all of our day to days are supposed to go. And we're all supposed to kind of be these cookie cutter models that fit into that structure. Where I feel like the shift is tapping into our own specific journey and evolving to our highest potential. And in order to do that, it's really focusing all your curiosity on your development and how you live out your purpose and how you've removed the blockers to that purpose. Once you start getting that little voice, really it's then, making you your priority in all of the things we've talked about. And so it's finding your strengths. There's lots of tools to help you do that. I'm a big believer in assessments. I love them. Finding tools to help you tell you about yourself, I think is huge. And then similarly, what are the things that you don't know about yourself? What do you need help with kind of giving you clarity on what your strengths are and how you define those? What is your human design makeup? That's another one that's been huge for me.
Yeah, and it goes back to the importance of stillness and tuning
Yeah.
into your body and into what you want. And I totally agree with just listening to what you need next. And I feel like talk therapy is a great space to like start your healing journey. And then growth is almost like addictive once you start doing it. Like
Yeah,
once you get to that next level, then you're like, okay, like what else can I do? What else can I like unlock in myself that's going to
that's right.
lead me into the next version of myself? So I think that's just so exciting to hear. And also for people who aren't familiar, I know you mentioned human design. Could you give like a one sentence, if that's possible,
Yes, yes,
answer
yeah.
as to what that is? Yeah.
So human design is one of the most woo-woo things that I use in my understanding and my own growth and that I share with other people. It's a birth chart. It's pairing the day that you were born, but then also 3 months before that is when it's in the universe, when in different practices is considered when your soul was created. And so it's, you plug in to get your birth chart for this modality, you plug in your where you were born, what your birth date what your birth date was and what the time of your birth was. It looks at the whole makeup of the planetary system in relation to all of that, and then you get this output of truly what your human design is. And essentially, that's your purpose for being here, strategies for you to be able to live out that purpose, blockers to that purpose. What does it look like as kind of your shadow self when you're not living kind of those kind of perfect alignment with who you are designed to be? And so it's really kind of a roadmap to help consider and as you shape, your gifts and where you spend your time, how you recharge. And it's been really huge in my practice. I've been using human design for myself for probably 5 years now. And I'm something called a splenic projector. So for me, a splenic projector is a couple things about that. Ideas for me, I need to make decisions that are a quick gut decision. Other people,
Mm,
other design types, they need to really kind of spend time and think and ruminate on things. Other people, they use their gut, but they need a few minutes with it. Splenic projectors, we know instantly. So, and then projectors are also one of mine that's the hardest is for me to be the most impactful. I need to wait for invitations. So I can't go and insert myself and if there's a big conference going on and I'm really pushing wanting to speak at that conference, that's likely going to fall flat. That is likely not going to come together for me. However, if an invitation comes because somebody heard the podcast and is interested in having me on the show, that invitation is aligned with my personal strategy. And so that's going to feel much more aligned to me than me trying to seek out my own invitation to it. So that's just kind of a little bit of the types of tips that come with human design.
I think that you're
Or
right in that as a collective, we are moving toward a more spiritual and aligned time. I
yeah,
think we're moving out of this like, all of us have to follow this one approach of doing things. That's what inspired me to start this podcast is, people need to start listening to that inner voice of what they want to actually be doing in
yeah.
their work and stop being in the corporate world if they're unhappy in it or changing careers, even if that is in the corporate world. But for someone who's feeling like a little bit like, oh, this sounds too woo woo, I would say just get your chart, plug it
Right.
into ChatGPT, and just see if any of what it's saying feels right to you. And like 90% of the time it will.
We
Yeah.
need all of us. I mean, that's kind of the point of it is that we need all of our different approaches. And exactly what you said is we have all of these tools. I'm a big believer in the Strengths Finders assessment from Clifton.
Mm,
It has been
hmm.
a huge one for me. Human design, Myers Briggs, there's all the personalities tests and stuff. I feel like it's like as many as them as I can get for myself. It just paints this picture. And then if it resonates with me, great. If it doesn't, it doesn't.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So just try it out if you're someone who's
Try it out.
skeptical.
Yeah.
Even
Well,
the Clifton Strengths Finder is a good one too. I've taken that one before.
yes. My biggest thing is that I just think that we've spent so long trying to be successful in somebody else's language and how somebody else defined it. And I think the biggest thing is that you get to decide what success looks like for you, and you get to decide how you reach that success for yourself. And there's just so many ways that you can get there.
Yeah. And just following that curiosity too.
Yes, and loving yourself enough to just stand by that no matter what. I think that's really, I think that's our purpose for being here.
Yeah. 100%. I agree. So I love closing this out with what are you most excited about in your career and your entrepreneurial journey? I know we've been talking a lot about like thinking big and getting clear on our purpose, but
Yeah.
I know you just launched this really exciting coaching business. What are you most excited about?
Gosh, I feel like 2026 is already shaping up with quite a bit of speaking opportunities. And I'm so excited. When I first launched the business, I really pictured kind of a stepping stone of starting with one on one coaching and eventually getting out and doing public speaking to be able to share my framework and the concepts we're talking about. And it's really been flipped how the opportunities are coming. And that's just another lesson I would share with folks who are starting their entrepreneurship journey is leaving room to pivot and go where the universe and the opportunities and all of your connections that we're talking about, like where that guides you.
Is really exciting. Just being open to different ways that success could come about versus just like one path and one way. So,
Yes,
oh,
yeah,
I'm so excited for you too.
for
And if
sure.
someone wants to work with you or connect with you, where's the best place they can find you?
Of course. MeghanDawson.com. So it's Megan is spelled a little weird. It's from the book The Thornbirds. MEGHANNDAWSON.com. I also host the podcast Becoming is Messy, which is on most podcast streaming platforms. And then I probably post the most on Instagram. I have an at Meghann Dawson, and an at Becoming is Messy is probably the social media I find myself at the most.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for coming on to Work You Love. This was such a good conversation.
Thanks, Danielle. Thanks for having me.
This was such a fun and insightful conversation. I loved the reminder that growth often starts as a tiny nudge. Here are a few takeaways to carry with you on your journey. The first is listen to that quiet nudge. Make space for stillness. That could be a walk or a shower or a 10-minute phone-free morning. Learn to tell your inner critic from your inner knowing. Your inner critic will feel fearful or shame or like you're not enough. Your inner knowing is calm, energizing, even if it's a little scary. Second, be open to many paths. Success doesn't have to look one way. Follow the through line of what you love and leave room to pivot when opportunities show up in surprising forms. 3, use people and moments as mirrors. Triggers and messy situations can be invitations to actually look inward. Ask yourself, what is this here to teach me? What pattern wants to end with me? And lastly, get curious and be open to receiving support. Just what if that random sign wasn't actually that random? Try one day to just pay attention to the signs around you. And when you do decide to take that action, don't be afraid to ask for help. Learning to receive is going to be so huge if you're making any kind of career change or starting your own business. Every little action you take, every small sign that you listen to, and every time you learn to just get quiet with yourself and understand what you truly want, moves you toward work and a life that actually feels like you and lights you up. If this episode resonated, share it with someone who needs the reminder and subscribe so you never miss an episode of Work You Love. I will see you next time.